Why your first $10,000 means the most. I want you to imagine this for a second. It's late at night. You're lying in bed, phone in your hand, scrolling through your bank app. Not because you're bored, but because you're anxious. You're doing that quiet math in your head. Rent, groceries, that one unexpected charge you forgot about. And then you look at the number sitting there. Maybe it's a few $100s. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's more than it used to be, but still not enough to make you feel calm. And somewhere in that moment, a thought slips in. How do people ever get ahead? Because when you hear someone talk about money online, they're talking about 6 figures, 7 figures, portfolios, passive income. They make it sound like the real game starts way up there, and everything before that barely counts. But here's the quiet truth no one really sits with. The hardest money you will ever make is your first $10,000. Not because it's the most impressive number, but because of what it represents. And once you really understand that, the entire way you see money starts to change. Most people misunderstand this topic because they think money grows linearly. They assume if it took them a year to save $10,000, then $20,000 just takes another year, and $100,000 is just more time stacked on top. But that's not how it actually feels when you're living it. The first $10,000 doesn't come from excess, it comes from tension, from trade-offs, from saying no to things you genuinely want, from learning restraint before you ever feel rewarded for it. That's why people don't talk about it honestly, because it's uncomfortable to admit that the beginning feels slow, discouraging, and deeply personal. If you're struggling to save, it's easy to think you're bad with money, lazy, behind. But that's not what's happening. You're fighting gravity at the very bottom, and gravity is strongest there. When you have very little money, every dollar has a job. It's already spoken for before it even arrives. Rent doesn't care about your goals. Food doesn't wait for your timeline. Life doesn't pause so you can get financially organized. So when someone says just save more, it feels almost insulting. Save from what? At this stage, saving isn't about optimization. It's about friction. It's about carving something out of a system that's already tight. That's why the first $10,000 feels so slow. You're not just building money, you're building the muscle to hold money. Think about it. Before you ever had savings, what happened when something went wrong? A car repair, a medical bill, a week of missed work. Stress, panic, credit cards, borrowing. That constant low-level anxiety humming in the background of your life. Your first $10,000 is the point where that hum starts to quiet down. Not disappear, but soften. And that changes everything. Here's something that rarely gets said out loud. The first $10,000 doesn't grow your wealth nearly as much as it grows your sense of control. Before that point, money controls you. Every decision is reactive. You're not choosing what's best, you're choosing what's survivable. But once you cross that threshold, even slightly, your brain starts to relax. You stop operating purely out of fear. Psychologically, this matters more than any return rate, because stress narrows your thinking. When you're constantly worried about money, your brain shifts into short-term mode. You prioritize immediate relief over long-term benefit. That's not a personal flaw, that's how humans are wired. So when someone with no savings makes a decision that looks bad on paper, it's usually not ignorance, it's pressure. Your first $10,000 is the pressure release valve. It creates space between you and the next emergency, space between you and desperation. And in that space, better decisions start to happen naturally. There's also a math side to this, but it's quieter than people make it sound. Yes, compound interest exists. Yes, money eventually starts working for you. But at $10,000, the numbers aren't magical yet. What's magical is that it's the point where money stops being purely transactional and starts becoming strategic. Before this, every dollar is about consumption or survival. After this, some dollars get to just sit, to wait, to grow slowly without being touched. That's new. That's powerful. It's the first time money feels patient, and patience is where real wealth actually begins. I want to talk about something else that doesn't get enough attention: identity. When you save your first $10,000, something subtle shifts in how you see yourself. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who's bad with money or someone who can't save. You now have proof. Not motivation, not theory, proof. And your brain takes that seriously. Because future behavior is shaped less by advice and more by identity. When you believe you're someone who saves, who plans, who can delay gratification, your decisions start aligning with that belief automatically. You don't need to force discipline as much. You're not fighting yourself anymore. That internal alignment is worth more than the money itself. Now, let's be honest for a moment. Saving your first $10,000 is not glamorous. It often happens quietly, slowly, in small, boring increments. It's skipping things you won't post about. It's choosing stability over appearances. It's being patient when no one's clapping. And that can feel lonely, especially when you're surrounded by people who look like they're enjoying life more than you are, traveling more, spending more, living louder. But here's the part that's hard to see while you're in it. You're not falling behind. You're building a floor. And a strong financial floor is what allows everything else to stand later. This brings us to the turning point, the moment you realize your first $10,000 isn't about becoming rich, it's about becoming unshakable. Because once you have a buffer, you stop negotiating from fear, at work, in relationships, in life. You don't need to take the first bad option that comes your way. You don't need to stay silent when something isn't right. You don't need to say yes just because you're scared of saying no. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys breathing room, and breathing room changes how you show up in the world. So how do you actually approach this without burning out or feeling deprived? You stop treating the first $10,000 like a finish line and start treating it like a practice. It's not about saving perfectly, it's about saving consistently enough that your nervous system starts to trust you. That might mean small automatic transfers. It might mean separating savings so you're not tempted to touch it. It might mean going slower than you'd like, but staying steady instead of quitting. You don't need extreme discipline, you need gentle persistence. And you don't need to optimize every dollar, you need to protect the habit. Because once the habit is real, the numbers eventually follow. It also helps to redefine what that $10,000 is for. Not as a symbol of success, but as a promise to your future self. A promise that you won't always live on the edge. A promise that one mistake won't undo everything. A promise that you're building stability, not just chasing growth. When you frame it that way, saving stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like care. So eventually, something interesting happens. Money starts to feel less emotional. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop panicking. You can look at your finances without that tight feeling in your chest. You can plan without dread. You can think long-term without feeling unrealistic. That emotional regulation is the real return on your first $10,000. Everything after that becomes easier, not because life gets simpler, but because you're no longer constantly bracing for impact. And if you're listening to this thinking, I'm not even close, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not behind. You're at the hardest part. The beginning is slow for everyone. The difference is most people don't talk about it once they're past it. But the skills you're building right now, awareness, restraint, intention, those don't disappear when the number grows. They compound too, quietly, reliably. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. Your first $10,000 matters not because it makes you wealthy, but because it makes you stable. It's the moment money stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you can work with. And you don't need to rush it. You don't need to compare it. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going. Progress beats perfection. Calm beats panic. And stability built slowly lasts longer than any shortcut ever could. And if you're still in the middle of that climb, you're doing better than you think.
If this video resonated with you, the next one goes even deeper. Click the video on your screen now. You don't want to miss it.